Well, thank you all for being here, and just a special thanks to Don again. I've had the good fortune of being in Arizona in politics a long time, and during that entire time, one constant has been Don Buttigieg, doing great work on a number of causes and the Rodell Foundation. So thank you for your help with this institute. Thanks, Pat, and all the staff and everyone who put this together. It's great to be here. As Pat said, every politician in Arizona is jealous of the margins that the governor got in elections as treasurer and then governor. And but I've been an admirer of Doug Ducey for a long time.
Thank
and
you.
had the privilege
Thank
to be in office during his time here in Arizona. And so there's much that we want to talk about. And thank you, students. I think we had 60 questions from students, and we've gone through. I'll have a few of those later on, but let's start right here at ASU, where you started in Arizona, here at ASU. Tell us about that time.
Yes, well, first I want to say thank you, Ambassador. Thank you, Pat, for the invite. Don, thanks for the sponsorship and advocacy. I am a proud Arizona State Sun Devil. I grew up in Toledo, Ohio. My folks split up. My mom moved out west my junior year of high school. And I had a college counselor who pointed on a map and he said, school's affordable out there and there's a lot of opportunity. And I got in my Datsun B210 and drove from Toledo to Tempe. I had never been to Arizona. I didn't know one person. I got gas on the corner of Rural and University. Every time I drive past that gas station, I think of that. And then I took a right-hand turn and moved into Manzanita Hall and just had a great experience on this campus. It's been a real joy to be part of the Institute of Politics. Every time I come on this campus, I think there's a special energy and incredible young people from every different walk of life, and to see how the university has grown and progressed and innovated is something I'm very proud of. So I'm very much looking forward to today. I studied finance at Arizona State University before the W.P. Carey School of Business. Worked my way through college at Hensley & Company, which was the Anheuser-Busch distributorship, which I think allowed me to start my career with Procter & Gamble. From there, we built Cold Stone Creamery to 1,440 stores. That was my entrepreneurial pursuit and my favorite class while I was at ASU. Met my wife, Angela. We have 3 sons, Jack, Joe, and Sam. 2 of the 3 are Sun Devils, but all 3 have attended classes here at ASU.
Well, meeting your wife here at college, was she a distraction or a help?
Well, I always said to my boys before college to remember girls are a distraction. Focus on your studies. So now I'm encouraging them to find some of these distractions as it's time.
Aren't we all? Yes. Well, let's talk about you. Before you became governor, you were treasurer. How did that prepare you, other than having a bit of a political base and knowing some of that? Mm-hmm. How did the subject matter help you when you became governor?
Well, governor was the job that I wanted, and the governor's office was not open. And if you remember in that tough year during the recession, Governor Brewer raised taxes, the 1-cent temporary sales tax, and it upset some people in the Republican Party, and I had not yet been to a legislative district meeting. I mean, I was really naive upon entering, and the sitting treasurer, a guy named Dean Martin, decided to challenge Jan Brewer and not run for re-election. The treasurer's office opened, and I had a gentleman who has become a good friend, a great advisor, and I don't like that this is where my mindset was at the time, but he came to me and he said, would you consider running for treasurer? And I was like, treasurer? I mean, is that an elected position? You get appointed to that? And he said, you know, that's the problem with people like you. You think because you were successful over here, you'll automatically be successful over there. He said, the governor's office isn't open. You'll have to put your name on a ballot, run a campaign. You'll learn something. You'll be able to do a good job as treasurer. You also see, do you like this? And can you be effective? And it turned out to be great counsel and advice, because treasurer is a great office in which to enter politics. My background was in finance, and I was able to figure out the good guys and the bad guys, of which there are many of both, fewer of the former in politics. And I also became a subject matter expert on the state budget. And people want to know, everybody understands how much you have in your checking account, your savings account, your IRA or whatever. And so to be able to communicate that was very helpful, to talk about the stewardship inside the treasurer's office. We did some things that had never been done, like an asset allocation study. This is not deep policy, but I think you would also note there's always a lot of low-hanging fruit when you enter politics, especially from the private sector, if you have an agenda and a plan. So treasurer was a great place to go and learn the ropes and prepare myself for the office that I really aspired to, which was the chief executive.
When did you know, you said by the time you ran for treasurer, you knew you wanted to be governor. When did you know that you'd run for elected office at all? The question I think you get, and I'm sure I get sometimes, is did you know in high school or college that you would run for elected office? When did you know?
I didn't know in high school or college, to be certain. I'd never been to Washington, D.C. I sold Cold Stone when I was 44 years old. I'm very patriotic, and I love all the symbols and stuff, not so much what goes on in Washington, but I wanted to see it. My boys were going on 8th grade trips out there, and I was in an organization called Young Presidents Organization. It's a private sector organization, and they have an inside Washington educational trip. And one of my Forum brothers had gone, had great access, got in the Oval Office for 45 minutes, was at the top floor of Homeland Security, and he came back raving about it. And they ran that program every 6 months. I went on the next 6 months, got there in September of 2008. I think on the day Senator McCain suspended his presidential campaign, the markets were melting down, and really got to see things that I was not aware of, how policy was made. We did have great access, and I came back with the bug to do something at home in Arizona, and the person I respected most, or at least reflected my political philosophy the most, was Senator John Kyle. I'd never met Senator John Kyle. I had never written him a check, but I did this just like you do diligence on a entrepreneurial pursuit. I called his office and asked for time with him, expecting to be delegated down to a junior staffer and maybe get 20 minutes. I went into the office, spent 90 minutes one-on-one with Senator Kyle. He encouraged me to run for governor. He walked me around his office as if I were his son-in-law. I said, I didn't expect any of this, Senator. And he said, well, we checked you out before you came. And he said, private sector experience and leadership ability are great attributes to go into politics. And I came home that night, our boys were young, Angela was making dinner, and I said, wow, John Kyle thinks I should run for governor. Got very quiet in the kitchen, we ate dinner, cleaning up afterwards. I said, what's the deal? Do you not think I would be good at this? And she said, I think you'd be very good at it. I think you should wait a decade. So I circled back with Senator Kyle. He said, you should do more investigation on this office. You're home in the morning, you're home at night, you're a very busy CEO. He said, there is a lot of sacrifice during the campaign, but the job of governor is very manageable, and that was great advice, and I found it very true.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Well, had you run for federal office, then you wouldn't have had to study budgets, because we don't balance them back there. That's only at the state level. And so anyway, you didn't do too much thinking about that one.
Well, it'd be nice. I know you and I are both big believers in federalism, and as bad as our politics are right now and as divided as we are as a nation, at the state level, politics seem to work a lot better.
Right, they do.
You see a lot more bipartisan bills. I think 94% of the bills I signed were bipartisan. I inherited a $1 billion deficit my first year. We were able to balance that budget by making some very unpopular decisions, but we had a balanced budget every year, and most states somewhat reflect that type of accountability. Let's
talk about leadership for a bit. You were in Arizona in a with big changes demographically, economically, politically during your 8 years. How did you adapt your leadership style or changes in margins in the legislature, and how did that work?
So I ran on making this change. I mean, I said, hey, I had built a company. Now I wanted to shrink a government and grow an economy. I was not satisfied. I thought Arizona was the greatest place in the world to live. After we sold Cold Stone, we could have gone anywhere. And I said, we're exactly where we want to be. But I didn't understand why all these companies were going to places like Texas and Florida, Utah, Colorado. California was more competitive then. And we were pretty much home building and construction. So I wanted to be the spokesperson and the salesperson for the economic growth of our state. And I'm very comfortable talking to a CEO, a decision maker, or an entrepreneur, much more comfortable than I am talking to a state legislator. I often don't know what motivates them, but I know what motivates business people, and that was really part of the agenda. And our economy's been transformed here. We have Taiwan Semiconductor, Lucid, Infosys. I will also say Michael Crow is an incredible partner in terms of economic development, and the changes and growth in the university have supported all of this. But today we are a powerhouse from advanced manufacturing to the top tiers, and we still have the wonderful tourism and service sector, which I came out of. So I think part of it, governor, I believe, is the best job in politics. You are in charge of your state. You don't have to participate in all this craziness that goes on in Washington, D.C., unless you choose to or comment on it. The other differentiation I'd make is governors are pretty collegial. We all have the same problems to solve inside our states. We might have a different philosophy or worldview on how we solve them, but there's a lot of best practices sharing, and it's the one organization that hasn't split apart. Republican and Democrat governors still meet in session several times a year, have a state dinner at the White House. So I thought the way to adapt was to have an agenda and a plan. And I was concerned a little bit as I was campaigning. You know, there's certain people you want to help. You think that they would be good partners. Sometimes that doesn't work out exactly as you planned. But I talked to some other governors. Jeb Bush was an incredible governor in Florida. If there was a Hall of Fame for governors, there'd be a statue of Jeb Bush and Mitch Daniels from Indiana in front of it. And I remember Jeb saying, you need to concern yourself with your campaign. You need to be elected. And regardless of what your legislature looks like, you'll be the one in the seat and you can drive policy. So I tried not to concern myself too much with all of the politics that were out there and more with the policy and the ideas. And I think the best leaders are those that persuade, that go out in the public square and make their case for the ideas that they believe in. And they don't have to describe those ideas with the descriptors of Republican or conservative. You want to talk on how it's going to make life better for Arizonans. And that helped me navigate through a lot of the noise and stay focused on the objective.
Yeah. I found during my time in Congress and in the House and the Senate, the most frustrated legislators I dealt with were those who were formerly governors. Because they got things done. They had to do it. They had to balance budgets, and they had control, executive control that you lose in a big legislative body. But so I take your point there.
You know, the first law that I passed, Ambassador, was the American Civics Act. Anyone that graduates high school here takes the same test that a newly naturalized citizen takes. And it was because some of the statistics that were coming out that people didn't know how many branches of government there are. They don't know how many justices sit on the Supreme Court. This is not a tough test. Who won the Civil War? Who was president during it? Who's father of the country? I mean, these are the questions. And people were scoring less than 50. But I think it's important. I'm going to talk a lot about being governor because that's my lived experience. But we need great legislators. And Arizona has an incredible tradition of Jeff Flake and John McCain and John Kyle. This is where we were not that long ago, because these are separate and co-equal branches. And if you are going to get something done as governor, you need to be able to work with your legislature.
Let's talk about governing. Talking about principles and pragmatism, when do you compromise? When do you stand on principle? How do you make that decision, those decisions as you go along?
So I think the first thing, if you are ever going to run for office, and I always encourage young people to go do something else first. Build a business, turn a school around, join the military, get some subject matter expertise in some other field. Also learn how to communicate, how to lead in small groups when you don't have the authority or the title. And if you do enter politics, you want to know what you believe in, because if you don't, there's a lot of people down at the state capitol that'll try to convince you of their good idea. And I did know what I believed in. I mean, I would identify myself as an American conservative who believes in a limited government and a strong American economy, the power of free enterprise, and America's standing in the world as the leader of the free world. Now, some of those are national and geopolitical positions, but you can boil that down to the state level as well. And then you are there to get things done. And you are governor. The great thing about being a governor is if you do win the race, you'll find out you've accomplished nothing yet, and you've got nothing done. Now, you do have charge of that government, but if you want to move an agenda forward, you have to get out in the public square, and you can tell how someone's going to, by how they will govern, by how they campaigned. If you campaigned on these ideas, you have permission to try to make them happen in the public square and through the legislative body. And somehow, somewhere in the last decade or two, compromise has become a bad word. I think that's wrong. I think that's a real lack of the understanding of history. We would not have a Constitution of the United States without compromise. We would not have had a Declaration. So I always looked at it as a balance of, yes, sometimes you have to give something up. And I looked at it from the standpoint of we can give up a little to get a lot. And we had a plan and an agenda. I also, at Cold Stone was also great training, not only because I understood the consumer, which is very similar to the voter, but we were a franchise system. So I had 1,440 stores. This is 1,440 active contracts. It's like having 1,440 spouses out there. Franchisees don't work for me. They go in business to be in business for themselves, but not in business by themselves. And I think a lot of the communication it took to keep a franchise organization together and heading in the same direction as we built a national brand were good skills in working with legislators. In that first year, we didn't have any money, but I would meet with every legislator one-on-one or in small groups of 3. And I'd say everybody knows what I want. You've seen the campaign, the inauguration, the state of the state. I'm curious, what do you want? What's important to you? And normally there would be something we could find to work together. And I said, we're not going to get a lot done this first session because we don't have any money. And I'm going to ask for your help in balancing that budget. It won't be very popular, but I ran on it, and I'll take the hit. And at this time next year, our economy will be better, the state will be more attractive, and we can make some investments in what we need to do. So I think that idea of being pragmatic is a sound working mindset, but the principles were all around the themes and values that I believed in from a political philosophy.
Right. Let's talk about crisis governing for a minute. Mm-hmm. You went through, obviously, economic volatility, immigration challenges all the time.
Yes.
COVID. Tell us about some of the things that you learned, or
yes,
things you wish you would have done, or
sure,
how was that?
And I welcome any questions on this as well. When you run for governor, you are signing up for a crisis. You know it's coming, you just don't know when. You've observed other governors in crisis, and Arizona has its fair share of natural disasters. We have wildfires, we have flooding, we've even had tornadoes in the state, and you oftentimes will see Rick Scott or Ron DeSantis with hurricanes in Florida. You actually go through a training session when you become a new governor on how to handle crisis. Governor Haley Barbour ran that. He was the governor of Mississippi during Katrina. And I remember he said to us, during a crisis, you are going to see the best of human nature, and you are going to see the worst of human nature. The unique thing about COVID, it was the crisis that hit every governor all at once at the same time. And I certainly saw the best of human nature, the worst of human nature. You want to rely on subject matter experts in this. And my mindset very quickly, because if you remember, COVID came in 2020. The first I heard of it was in December in Washington, D.C. I had not heard the word spoken in Arizona. By February, some things were beginning to shut down. It hit out on the East Coast. Governor Cuomo and Governor Baker in Massachusetts were getting hit hard, and the alarmism began immediately. I was blessed with an incredible agency head in Dr. Kara Christ. She had studied biology in college, microbiology for her graduate degree. She had handled the last several things like H1N1, the measles, Ebola. She was the type of person you wanted to sit next to in science class. She was very good at this. We did our first briefing in Arizona, and I said, what do you think, Doc? Does this kind of feel like Ebola and H1N1, which were here and gone rather quickly? And she said, no, this feels different. And we walked out into a largest press gaggle I had seen at the Department of Health Services, and I remember one of the snarky reporters said, are we overreacting? And are you taking this seriously? And I said, yes, we are taking it seriously, and we did from day one. COVID really didn't come to Arizona. If you remember, that was the most beautiful spring that we ever had. Everyone was outside, yet we were starting to see the other parts of the country really be impacted. And I remember I was running the Republican Governors Association at that time, and I'd host a conference call every Monday afternoon at 4 o'clock. All the governors would call in and share best practices. And Charlie Baker from Massachusetts in about April called me and said, thank you for hosting these conference calls. They've been very helpful to me in Massachusetts and what's going on in greater Boston. And none of these decisions are easy. He said, I want to ask you in Arizona, he said, do you know more people that have died of COVID or more small businesses that have been affected? And I said, Charlie, I don't know anybody that has COVID. I have 17,717 contacts in my phone, and I don't know anyone that has COVID, and our hospital capacity is below normal capacity. Well, that all changed in June when the temperatures hit 100 and everybody came inside. That's when we were really hit. So I know that the Trump-Pence administration takes on a lot of water for their handling of COVID, but I do think at the time that federalism decentralization model allowed Massachusetts to have its mitigations when necessary. I was able to make the right calls, or the calls that I believed were right for Arizona in June, July, and August. And once we had a better handle on who was in harm's way, and it was really people 65 and older with underlying health conditions, we were able to, I think, make targeted decisions. And I just had to get in the mindset because there was no way to please everyone on this one. There was really no way to please anyone because everyone had their own opinion. Both extremes were very active on this. And my mindset was, I am going to do what is in Arizona's best interest without paying attention. If there was a best practice or idea I could garner from another state, but some governors who will remain unnamed in this setting started to play politics with COVID immediately. We were headed into an election year, and we all saw it. We all saw the disruption. So I made the best possible decisions I could make in real time with the facts I had in Arizona, and I was surrounded by very smart, capable people. So Harry Truman said, you want to have experts on tap, you don't put experts on top. Those decisions were left to me, and I stand behind them.
Oh, well. From somebody, I was retired from the Senate gratefully by the time this hit, but I felt for school boards and city council members and obviously state legislators and governors and those at the local level more than at the federal level, because you had to make decisions often in real time, like you said. So that was a tough time.
That was a good example of politics being played at the state level. It was one thing in the spring when COVID first came. There was just tremendous fear and anxiety. Parents of all stripes didn't want their kids out and about, and we were coming to the end of the school year. So I felt like we were able to handle that rather well. As we got through the summer and September rolled around, and we knew where vulnerable people were, it was time to get kids back to school. And there was a lot of resistance from organized government unions, and that's where I saw some of the worst of human nature. And you saw our charter schools wide open and thriving. You saw our Catholic schools wide open and thriving. And I think a lot of kids in our traditional K-12 district schools were ripped off. And it doesn't matter how smart you are, how good your attention span is, you are not going to learn on a screen. If you're lucky enough to have a screen. If you have 3 or 4 kids in the house, how many computers or iPads do you have? How good is your Wi-Fi signal? So we've got a lot of makeup work to do for that.
We've talked about leadership and what helps to have subject matter knowledge and experience. Talk about character for a minute. What role does character play? How important is that in terms of a leadership qualification?
Well, I think if you're Jesuit trained, which is my high school upbringing, you have some study of the Greeks, and character is destiny. Mm-hmm. So in this business, this is a tough business. And I take my hat off to people that want to enter. It takes a certain amount of courage to put your name on a ballot. There's not a lot of glamour that comes with it. And at times, especially in crisis, but really at any time, because you are entrusted as a public servant, it's going to be the differentiator. I think somebody of my political beliefs is never going to have a very warm and affectionate relationship with the press. But I did have an open relationship. I was accessible. And I remember once during COVID, there's a famous reporter down at the state capitol named Howie Fisher. He's been, I think, through 7 governors. He's got an incredible memories, very hardworking guy. And so I always respected that. He was there on Monday morning, or if I was speaking on Saturday at a veterans event, he was there. And I remember I was walking out of one of the COVID press conferences, and I always timed them for the end of the day because I was done after those press conferences. I was just going home. And he said, "Governor, is anybody happy with your decisions?" And I said, "Well, I'm headed home right now. Howie and my dog Woody is going to greet me, and he's going to be so happy to see me." So I think at least somebody is. But it was at those times of knowing that, and I sometimes turn the radio on and listen to some talk radio. I stopped doing that after several weeks because it is very easy to pick apart. It's easy to be in the cheap seats. It's easy to sit on the sidelines. But also as a citizen, you're allowed to have your opinion. You're allowed to use your voice, and you should, not only in a crisis, but I do think it's at that time when the winds are buffeting you from one side or the other, or during something like COVID, it's going to be both sides. You're going to rely a lot on the preparation that you've put before, and traditionally that reveals itself as your character.
That's great. Well, let me just say, Governor Ducey's here at the Dialogues for Democracy. That's only one of the parts of the Institute of Politics that we have here. We also We have a lot of other speakers coming for these dialogues throughout the year. We also formed a partnership with a group called Open to Debate. We had a debate downtown. It's a partnership with PBS as well and NPR. We had a debate on birthright citizenship that aired on PBS stations across the country just a bit ago, and we'll have another debate in the spring there. But we also have, as part of this program, fellows who come on campus, and you've been doing that for the last several weeks. And so Governor Ducey's been meeting with a number of what we're calling student ambassadors who have been able to meet directly with him and talk about their careers, their schooling, and get advice. Talk about that experience. How's that been?
It's been delightful. I mean, the ambassadors that have been showing up have incredible questions and really have a real interest in public policy, and I think some of them know more about my record than I remember, so I give them a lot of credit for the homework that they've done in preparation. And I don't know how many political science majors are here. I always say this, and I say this somewhat flippantly, but there's a kernel of truth in it. I think that political science is not the best major that you can pursue. But if you are pursuing it, I would encourage you to go work on a campaign while you're studying it. Find a candidate that you believe in. And trust me, they need volunteers. They need people to knock doors, make phone calls, and help out. And if you show a level of competence and responsibility, pretty soon you'll have a paid position on this campaign. And I think that will bring the richness and texture of what you're studying so much better than just a curriculum and a textbook. And the great thing about that political science is we have these campaigns every 2 years and a special election more often than not in between. So you will get so much out of it. And even if you're just curious about that, I think one of the real pleasant surprises for me entering politics in the second half of my career was the incredible young people who were intelligent and hardworking and worked on my campaign and my administration. They're as fine a people as I've worked with in my entire life, including Procter & Gamble and Cold Stone Creamery. So those types of relationships and learnings and network are out there for you. Take advantage of it.
We go to a couple of the questions from students. One was, what is your message to young people who've lost faith in the ability of our government to maintain and follow democracy? How can the U.S. and other countries combat political polarization? That's from Abigail Morrissey, an ASU student.
Well, I would encourage you to keep the faith. And I know that sounds easy. In my faith tradition, despair is a capital sin. So we cannot despair. But it is a discouraging time. I mean, I feel for young people, all you have known is insanity for nearly a decade now. And, you know, I grew up in a time of gentlemen like Jimmy Carter and Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush. And these were people of incredible character, whether you agreed with their political philosophy or not, and in models and incredible examples. We are in a populist time, a nationalist time, an isolationist time, and a protectionist time. Now, this is not the first time as a country that we have been in an era like this, but it is the first time in our lifetime. And this is why I think a study of history and other times when we were much more divided than we are today will make you hopeful and give you the energy to take some action. I do think good leadership can solve a lot of this. There's a lot of talk of unity. There's never unity in politics. There's never unity in America. We've got a two-party system. It's set up to be adversarial. We've got three separate and co-equal branches. They're set up to be adversarial. But I do think you can be more unifying. You can get out in the public square and welcome and invite others to participate, especially on issues where they have energy, because you should be attempting to solve problems and to make life better. We are not there right now. It is a very divided time, so I don't want to be Pollyannish about it, but this can break. Fevers do break. Populism is not long-lasting. There's traditionally not a unifying thread that unifies the populace together. They're angry and they are upset and they've lost faith in leaders and institutions. And much of that loss of trust has been well earned. So I think if you are fortunate enough to be in office, you need to handle yourself and carry yourself and perform your duties in a way where you can help to build that trust back. But when Benjamin Franklin came out of the Constitutional Convention, he was asked by a lady on the streets of Philadelphia, "What have you given us, sir?" And his answer was, a republic, if you can keep it. They knew that this was a great experiment. I don't think in their wildest dreams they could have ever imagined the size and scope of the country, the place it has in the world. And we've been here nearly 250 years. If we're going to be here another 250 years, it's up to the people in this room and the citizens outside of this room. So it's, a lot of people say to you when you enter politics, especially from the private sector, "Oh, I don't like politics. I mean, politics isn't my thing." And I read this in Charles Krauthammer's book. Well, I didn't read this. The first thing I would say to my team is, listen, I'd make a really good benevolent dictator. But this is how we do it. I mean, you have to get the votes. You have to persuade the people. And, Krauthammer talked about leaving the medical profession and going into politics because he saw it as the higher calling. That politics is the way that we answer our toughest questions and settle our biggest arguments. And while it's not an attractive time in politics nor a positive time, it is a time that is, I think, calling out for purpose, mission, leadership, and involvement.
A lot of the questions students had to do with the future of my party and yours, the GOP. Where do you think it's headed?
So I told this story to the ambassadors yesterday. When you run for office, it's incredible what we put our candidates through, what it takes to earn one of these offices. Yet I do think it is the right thing to do. I mean, people get to vote. They get to make their decision. They get to interview you and ask you any question under the sun. And this is kind of in an alternative universe. In 2014, I'm up in Flagstaff in a much less divided time at the Flagstaff Republican Women's meeting, which they have every Tuesday night, first Tuesday of every month. And there's a sweet lady who's about 4'11" and has to stand in a box. And before she starts the meeting, she says, "Question, who rules the world?" We're now going to get to the program, and we'll hear your answers at the end of the meeting. And it was just so captivating how she put it. I wanted to hear what her answer was. And she, posed the question to all the ladies at the end of the meeting, and it's wrong, 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 wrong. She said, "The people who rule the world are those who show up. So let's keep showing up and bring more people next week." So to answer the question of our party, I am a Republican. I'm a Republican because it's been the home for American conservatism for decades and really brought to life in the state of Arizona with Barry Goldwater as our candidate and senator. I like to use the line that, Barry Goldwater ran for president in 1964, and he did not lose that election. It just took 16 years to count the votes. And Barry Goldwater's philosophy and the conscience of a conservative came to life in Ronald Reagan. And a lot of people like myself that were coming of age and in college at that time were attracted to that political philosophy. I never recall my parents using the word Republican or Democrat. My father was a cop during the times of Nixon, and I think he was pretty much disgusted with all politicians at the time. So I think the way forward for our party are the principles that we were given from the founder of Lincoln as the first Republican, through Reagan as this populist fever breaks. But we are in a populist time. A lot of times people will say conservatives and establishment or conservative and rhinos. I don't think that's exactly accurate. I think we have a MAGA component, and we have conservatives, the more traditional conservatives that come from more of the school that you and I grew up in. Politics is a game of addition, so you want to welcome new people into the room. But organizing this coalition, I don't know what the unifying thread or principles. I don't believe there's a platform right now for the party. So I think that this is all to be determined. And we're in for a off-year election cycle in 2026. After that, the race for the next president of the United States will begin, and I think it will be determined during that time. But I think those are the North Stars.
Great. Another question.
What do you think?
Well, I just wrote a piece for the Washington Post this past week titled, "The Great GOP Migration Has Begun." And I do think, I agree with you, we're in a time of populism. Populism is not really a governing philosophy. I think we have to move back to established principles that are governing principles. And so
one other note,
share that.
and I think you saw this as well, much of this is new, at least in our lifetime. But we did see some of the seeds of this in 2010 with the Tea Party.
You bet.
And a lot of the folks that you'll see today that have on the red hat all the time were some of the first Tea Party members. And the Tea Party members, that was taxed enough already. I thought that was well-intentioned and well-meaning. But this populism, we see it on the right, but we also have populism on the left. I mean, look at what happened in New York City in the mayor's race. Look at the popularity of AOC. Look at Bernie Sanders, who was not taken all that seriously in the Democratic caucus, giving Hillary Clinton fits as she runs for the presidency. Many of these voters were Obama voters in 2008 and Trump voters in 2016. They are not satisfied. They are not seeing movement or action or improvement at the federal level, and their vote is up for grabs.
Great. Back to a student question. Can a no labels ticket, can a unity ticket strengthen democratic governance by building a durable cross-partisan majority, or does it risk fragmenting accountability and amplifying spoiler effects without any realistic path to govern?
So it's a free country, and it is wide open. I don't know how familiar you are with No Labels. I have a lot of familiarity with this organization. There are great people from both sides that are involved in it. I believe all their intentions are good. I'm not an opponent of the two-party system. Most people say, oh, I don't like either party, neither party polls highly, and I get that. I don't know if you watched the World Series, but there was two teams in it. It was the Dodgers and the Blue Jays. And most championships have an opponent. And the thing I like about the two-party system is you're trying to gain a majority. You're trying to win a larger percentage than the other person. I think a third party can be attractive initially, but it's not the answer in and of itself. Countries like Great Britain and Israel have more parties than three. They are more difficult to govern. I think if No Labels, which if they didn't ask my advice, but if I was giving it, I would have a different name for my party than No Labels. But if you're going to be competitive, you have to be able to get on the ballot in all 50 states. Otherwise, you're just a disruptor. So, but I think the intentions are well-meaning and pure. And I do think this idea of not being locked in, we obviously believe in democracy. That's what a republic is a form of democracy. It wasn't all that long ago we didn't have that much democracy in selecting our candidates. That would come out of what were called smoke-filled rooms. And watching some of our primaries, which is democracy writ large, has made some people nostalgic for smoke-filled rooms because oftentimes it's the primary that puts a person in a position where they have disqualified themselves for the general election. And we've certainly seen that on the right in Arizona in the last two cycles.
Along those lines, would you favor any of the institutional reforms that have been floated out there and some states, like Alaska, have adopted to change the primary structure?
So the primary structure, what this is typically called is ranked choice voting. This is also something that I think has very good intentions, but it's hard to keep politics out of politics. And politicians are going to play games. So the ranked choice voting is you rank everybody 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If one doesn't get 50%, they go to 2. Well, if I know I'm running 1, but I'm below 50%, and Jeff's running 2, I'm going to ask people to vote me 1 and vote Jeff 5, or skip Jeff.
You wouldn't really do that, would you?
I wouldn't do it to you. But the idea of it is in reality, in practice, what this is a runoff until somebody gets 50%. I don't like how Georgia does their senatorial elections, but this is how they do them. I can't imagine getting to the end of a senatorial election and you don't receive 50% of the vote, so then you go into a runoff with who came in second until someone gets 50%. That's the philosophy behind ranked choice voting. So if we're going to do it, let's do it that way. But I think there would be a lot of fatigue and exhaustion around it.
You mentioned the quote that...
Oh, the other thing I'd like to add on
Yes.
that, we make it very hard. Arizona's pretty reflective of the country. We're 34% Republican, 33% Democrat, and 33% independents. If you don't win the independents, you don't win. Yet we make it difficult for independents to participate in the primaries. I think a lot of the things that they want to accomplish with no labels, a lot of things they'd like to accomplish with ranked choice voting could be solved by independents participating in primaries and us having better candidates that are more unifying on the general election ballot.
That's a great point. There's not, I mean, those are reforms, but there are other ways to go at it.
Yes.
We're taking a change to the primary without even going ranked choice voting. That could happen. You mentioned the quote that Barry Goldwater didn't lose. It just took 16 years to count the vote. The one I think that made that quote was George Will. And he's talked about that often. And I was texting back and forth with George Will this week and I told him I was going to be with you, and he wanted me to ask you if you were running for president because George Will is a big fan of yours, and I'm a big fan of George Will. And
well, the answer is no, I'm not running for president, but I share your affection for George Will. He's amazing. I feel like I've known him since I was a little kid. You know, he was always speaking out on
You
baseball.
have. He's been going along that long. Right?
And he painfully had to sit next to Sam Donaldson on ABC this week. And I think when he was 31, he looked like he was 61. Now he's 81, and he looks like he's 61.
That's right.
He's fit as a fiddle and as sharp as a tack. And there's a lot of great books you can read if you're studying political science or care about the things the ambassador and I are touching on. But there is nothing better than the manifesto that George Will published several years ago called The Conservative Sensibility. It is excellent. I would buy it. I would read it. It's also very easy to listen to on Audible. And George Will has coined a lot of phrases.
Yeah, he has. Well, in the time we have left, we have time for you to give a free advertisement for what you're doing now. Citizens for Free Enterprise.
Yes, I'm leading an organization called Citizens for Free Enterprise. We educate and advocate for free enterprise on college campuses and high schools and with independent businesses. It concerns a lot of folks my and Jeff's age that today if you were to hold up a placard that said socialism and a placard that said capitalism, in many college classrooms across the country, it's about a 50-50 proposition. We don't talk a lot about free enterprise during campaigns. They seem to be caught up in the social issues, and I don't want to discount the social issues. They're important. We battle on them. I had to take positions on them, but they traditionally change every several years. Free enterprise is an evergreen American principle. It's so much of what has made us exceptional. It's what allows us to live in the most powerful country in the history of the world and overcome all the reckless and foolish spending decisions they've made in Washington, D.C.
He points at me. Come on, right.
Because our economy continues to grow, and you can have big dreams and come here and crack the books and study and go out and find a job and live a great adventure. But we don't want to lose that. I don't know how much travel you've been able to do. I was not able to do much travel. We spent a lot of time in Toledo. Going to Arizona was like going to a foreign nation for me and a voyage of discovery. But I've been fortunate in my adult life to do a lot of travel. I enjoy it very much, but every time I come home, I say, God bless America. We enjoy opportunities here, a quality of life, an egalitarianism that you can witness no other place in the world. And free enterprise is a huge component of that. There are things we can fix in free enterprise. I want to see everybody have the opportunity to climb the economic ladder, but something that is a core American belief is opportunity for all of our citizens, and that's what free enterprise provides.
You mentioned the election in New York, where a avowed socialist was elected.
Very talented socialist.
Yes, our son is one of those we'd like to find a distraction, but in the meantime, he's in New York, 28, single, and so he moved there with a lot of his friends, and we asked him to explain the phenomenon of voting for a socialist. Why do young people do it? And his point was, he said, it's tough to believe in capitalism when you have no capital.
Yes.
How do you address that with your organization? How do you make young people believe in free enterprise again?
Yes, it's a
It's
very fair question.
The average person doesn't buy a home now until they're 40. So
another good George Will quip, I think he's quoting H.L. Mencken, and he said something like the definition of democracy is people voting for what they want. And then they get it good and hard. And that's what they're about to get in New York. Mm-hmm. But like I said, there's no doubt the political skills of Zoran Mandami, and he fed into a loss of trust in the system. He was also blessed with his opponents in that race. And part of the reason we use the word free enterprise, and it is a differentiation from capitalism. Capitalism is about capital. It is about money. But free enterprise is broader than that. And I would say to anybody here that's got entrepreneurial genes or instincts, you don't always need money to go into the marketplace. You can get a job. You can save. You can borrow. I would encourage you to turn to CNBC and watch Shark Tank, and watch the people showing up there that have no capital, asking Mark Cuban and other folks for investment for a percentage of their business. I think that if people understood those principles, they would have more confidence that they can climb the economic ladder, that they can learn in their 20s and they can earn in their 30s and 40s on housing. This is an issue. This is a crisis. I bought my first home, and it was an unbelievably expensive home. I made $22,200 a year and a company car. My wife, Angela, had about the same salary. We didn't yet have kids. We were double income, no kids. The most we could qualify for was $179,900, and we were in Southern California. And no homes were at that rate, but one was at $220,000 that had been on the market for months and months. I put a picture of our wedding on the offer, and I put the statement from the bank that said, this is everything. I mean, we don't have anything else. The guy accepted the offer. We moved in, but like I said, I was 26. My boys are now 28, 26, and 22. Them entering the housing market is much different and challenging in Arizona, and this is a supply and demand issue. We need more housing. This is how you bring the price down. It's not through price controls or rent controls. Read Thomas Sowell in Basic Economics if you want to understand that. We have a supply issue. Much of this will be solved in not that long a time. The baby boomers will no longer be here in 30 years, but you don't have 30 years to wait. And this is really where good policy and leadership can make a difference. When we moved back to Arizona and started Cold Stone, I was then 34 years old. We bought a house at Tatum and Jomax. It was $239,000, 5 bedrooms. I said, we can have as many kids as we want. We will never have to move. That house today, which is a starter home, is at $1.4 million. That is not a starter home. Somebody who's starting their career cannot move into it. So this is a supply issue. We can build more houses. You can streamline permitting. You can remove the checkboard that is the state and federal land, of which we are blessed with so much in Arizona. But it's my belief that the government should not own this land. Doesn't mean we don't protect some of this land. Doesn't mean that we don't have wide open spaces and parks and green belts, but we can build more housing.
Well, thank you. I just want to thank all of you for supporting the Institute of Politics and coming to events like this. I want to thank Governor Ducey for coming on campus as a visiting fellow this semester, and thank you to the donors who make this possible. This is great. This is just what the Institute of Politics is about, to expose students to practitioners in the field. If they want to enter public service, they can see this is a great example, and Doug Ducey is a great example of a public servant. So thank you for being here.
Thank you,
all.
Ambassador. Thank you.